Whoa! We have a Patreon page. Just in case you didn't know, but I presume at this point you do. We mention it all the time. We do some cool stuff over there, like monthly Patreon-only Let's Argues, classic album live streams you guys suggest, access to our Discord community too. And every once in a while on this channel, we will post a clip show of some replies and answers I've given to some Patreon-only Let's Argue episodes. And that's essentially what this video is gonna be. Link to the Patreon page that I'm talking about so much down below in the D-Box. And even if you don't join, enjoy the video anyway. You're the best. Here we go. David Bowie being alive to experience and appreciate TPAB is one of the most beautiful reassurances in all of music, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you know, one thing I will say in reaction to this comment here that I do like is, you know, I love a good artist who has their classics. They've been around for decades, and they're still very open and vocal about new music that is interesting and exciting. If only more musicians and, you know, music fans would do the same in terms of staying plugged in to new stuff and picking out stuff that continues to be exciting, and, you know, just showing the more narrow-minded among us that, you know, all the great music out there, it's not just old music. You know, there's new music out there that is just as exciting as the old stuff, and we should celebrate it and not get up our asses when, you know, we see something like Magdalena Bay's last record ranking as high as like a Joni Mitchell album on Album of the Year. Shouldn't we just be happy that we're all just like kind of collectively enjoying this thing? We should all just be enjoying things, except when those things suck ass. Anyway, people who assess music objectively piss me off a little. Yeah, I mean, as you guys know, I'm constantly reminding you and the world that everything I say as far as like album critiques and so on and so forth, it's just my opinion. It is my opinion, which is not to say that, you know, it's unquestionable or that it can't be, you know, taken to task. For sure it can. I'm down for pushback. I'm down for counterpoints and counter critique and defenses and ideas. I feel like that's what makes music discourse great. But instead, a lot of the time, a bulk of the responses, negative ones anyway, that I will get to certain takes that I have will be like, you're old, you're bald, you're white, you're this, you're that. And not that those things are like inherently bad things to be. I'm glad I'm almost 40. What would the alternative be? Dying before I'm 40? Or, I don't know, staying a certain age forever? That'd be kind of weird. All I'm saying is that there are a lot of responses to the takes and reviews that I have of people just like trying to invalidate my thoughts with stuff that is like irrelevant to my fucking opinion for the most part. I mean, I'm not going to say the fact that I'm bald has no influence on my musical preferences. It does have at least some. But yeah, at the end of the day, it is just my opinion, just like it is anybody fucking else's. And just because you like or dislike a particular piece of music and have some kind of insight as to, you know, what the underground and the wider world of music and art is, doesn't necessarily mean you're like the ultimate authority on things. And it doesn't mean that song X or Y or Z that you hate doesn't have a time and a place and an audience somewhere else. The Stones deserve more love from Gen Z, even if their music can give off boomer vibes at times. I mean, I guess I can understand why Gen Z wouldn't be that much into the Stones. Blues rock and stuff like that isn't exactly hot right now. On top of that, the Stones do have some pretty problematic songs. Brown Sugar, stuff like that. On top of it, like, for the most part, Gen Z fucking hates the Beatles. What hope do the Stones have? Maybe embracing them is like, you know, the anti-Beatles pick and choice, but I feel like they're not really like invested in the Beatles versus Stones debate. The Viagra Boys aren't only a great band and one of the freshest acts in rock right now, but Sebastian Murphy and his attitude and humor make me want to go back to the punk roots and not give a fuck in the healthiest sense, being myself and not pulling my belly in, for example. He has been a positive influence for me these years. I don't know. I suppose you could read their music that way. I mean, there is like definitely a freedom to what Viagra Boys does. Like, you know, I think it is their intention to kind of like get listeners and get people to like drop their guard a little bit and like not be so self-conscious in some ways, but simultaneously, I do think the band's like presentation and their aesthetic and everything is like very carefully crafted in terms of like the references and the memes and the aesthetic that's kind of delivered and the storytelling. And on top of it, like when you look more into Sebastian personally and the way that he has kind of like, you know, grown as a person and as a musician over the years, like he's somebody who you know, at one point was like in a very dark rock bottom type place and needed to pull himself out of that in order to gain the stability necessary to kind of like be doing what he's doing now as a musician, a full-time musician, and a musician who also like has something of significance to say. I mean, he's simultaneously somebody who, you know, doesn't try to, you know, I guess like portray himself or edit himself, groom himself, present himself in a way that seems like, you know, too calculated, too commercial, too marketable in, you know, like a mainstream sense. But simultaneously, he and Viagra Boys seem like they do still put a lot of thought into, you know, the messaging behind the band. And that's not a bad thing. I feel like that's part of what makes Viagra Boys great. Like they care a lot about their aesthetic. They care a lot about the way their videos look, the way their songs sound. But look, what I'm ultimately saying here is that I see a lot of purpose in much of what Viagra Boys do, even in something as simple as like, hey, maybe you shouldn't really give a fuck if you have like a bit of a tummy or, you know, whatever. Maybe there's bigger things to worry about in the world, you know, other than whether or not you have like a gut. I feel like the band is like very much about giving a fuck about important things, you know, about stuff that actually like matters. You know, even with the new LP, I'm still going on this rant. There are a lot of themes around sort of like, you know, health, mental health, physical health. And that doesn't come from a place of like, you know, trying to make a joke about like caring about your health or caring about your well-being. No, the messaging about, you know, wellness on that record, as well as like politics on Cave World, is very much about like, you know, don't care about this to the point or in such a way to where you're falling down a rabbit hole, you're self-destructing, you're, you know, knee-deep in conspiracies and bullshit and so on and so forth. Like, don't allow weird lies and false information around these topics swirl around your head to the point where, like, you're destroying yourself, which in a time period of unhealthy obsessions and echo chambers and, you know, people wormholing on the most toxic and awful and terrible shit. I feel like that's kind of messaging that, frankly, we need today. A take you can bring home to mom. Butt rock should be abolished as a term. There isn't butt rap, butt pop. So why do we differentiate commercially crass rock from other better rock? Why are Kendrick Lamar and Ja Rule both basically under the same umbrella when bands like Nirvana and Seether aren't? What is your suggestion, really? Is it that butt rock should be eliminated as a concept entirely, just like point blank period, or that butt rock would be okay if there were other butt-centric versions of other genres? If there were, would it be fine? But what I guess I can respond to is, why aren't there different terms for other commercially crass styles of music, so on and so forth? And I don't know, I feel like that has to do with what the community and culture within those genres wants to do in terms of like labeling certain artists or sounds or trends within that style of music. Who knows? Maybe one day there will be like a term butt rap. I mean, I know it's not like exactly the same thing, but you know, for a time, we did have like, mumble rap floating around as a, super dismissive term, kind of categorizing certain rap trends within the genre that fans of more lyrical hip hop and older hip hop didn't really care for. And I feel like there's just something hyper elitist about the rock community that when they hear rock music, that doesn't strike them as like, coming from a place that's like artistic and classic and so on and so forth. It automatically has to be like trash, garbage, the worst thing ever. And I feel like fans of other styles of music, and maybe I'm wrong about this, are sort of generally more open to when certain artists kind of pursue more commercial pathways within that certain genre of music. I don't know. It's anecdotal. I'm just kind of giving my own perspective here. This is my argument. I'm sure there's maybe reasons or examples that would prove I'm wrong, but that's just my kind of perspective on it. Who is Aphéx's twin? It's Venetian Snares. Next question. Say it 3 times fast. Shout out to my dad. Which wrist watches are Swiss wrist watches? 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 3 times. Didn't do it fast, but I mean, did it decent. Daddy Yankee is one of the most important pop artists of the last 20 years, given the reggaeton wave that has taken over the world. He played a major role in popularizing the genre for U.S. audiences and abroad through the 1990s and 2000s. He deserves his flowers, and also Gasoline is still a banger. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But I mean, I don't know if I would say he's like one of the most important artists. I mean, if anything, you could say he's like just kind of a pioneer, not necessarily even an innovator though. He's not like the godfather of reggaeton, but like certainly he was significant in terms of bringing it into the mainstream and did it during a time when, he was one of a few Latin artists of his type and stripe to get as big as he did with this type of music. And, you could say from there, he kind of like held down the fort. He paved the way a bit for other artists to see mainstream success with their music as well. However, a lot of that has to do with just sort of like changing demographics and the way the music industry works and how streaming and a host of other things have allowed music consumption to become far more global than it ever has been before. And these genres of music were always massive and always popular and always had, artists on the ground creating them consistently. It's just that there were more cultural barriers at play back in the day, and you didn't really have like kind of the widespread exposure to various popular Latin music styles on a consistent, regular basis that we do today. I mean, sure, you had your crossover hits and artists like Daddy Yankee, for example, like, Ricky Martin. But in most cases, a lot of that stuff was usually like very simplified so that American audiences could kind of like casually enjoy it too. Whereas like these days, I think we're getting like a lot more regular exposure to more adventurous and very interesting reggaeton variations. But yeah, I mean, for sure, Daddy Yankee was important for kind of like setting the stage with how much exposure the genre is seeing today. The mixing on most of the Smashing Pumpkins albums is bad. Are we counting like all of the more recent albums that suck? Because, I mean, Are you just making this point merely because the Smashing Pumpkins have just continued dropping records past the point where their music was good? I mean, if that's like the way you're coming at this, what you're putting out here may not be that profound of a statement. I know for a fact you are not telling me that Melancholy is a badly mixed album. Like, 1979 is one of the most perfectly and smoothly mixed songs of all time. So you cannot possibly be talking about that album and that song. And even like a lot of the Siamese Dream stuff, yeah, it is a little sludgy and Billy's vocals are kind of buried, but his vocal timbre cuts through the mix really nicely. Plus, on top of it, the guitars sound amazing on that record. They're so sludgy and heavy. And sure, like Gish is kind of rough around the edges, but that was like so early on in their career. The mixing on Adore, even though that's like not the band's best material, is for the most part crisp. And I don't know, if anything, like on some of the records to follow immediately after that, like if there was any real issue, I think the band's sound started to get too clean and too tame. But I know you cannot possibly be talking about a song like 1979 being badly mixed. It makes me sad that new age musical aesthetics are mostly seen as bad and corny because it's mostly associated with music they play at spas or music for hippies that burn sage and shop at Whole Foods. The glossy and easy listening sounds associate with new age can be amazing when applied in interesting ways. See Love Deluxe by Sade. But outside of individual cases and older vaporwave, it's mostly just relegated to meditation CDs or really lame stuff that no one listens to. I mean, honestly, these days, I hear a lot of pop artists embracing in-production aesthetics that are new age adjacent. Caroline Polachek or like Julia Holter are certainly examples. I think 106 Point Never also on multiple records embraces new age aesthetics, but it really kind of depends on the album. I mean, it is true. These sounds are mostly seen as corny and just like not cool, but most of the time when that is the case, that's when I sort of see these sounds blatantly being labeled as new age. In fact, I do think there are a lot of artists who are like still borrowing inspiration from these ideas. They're just incorporating them into different styles of music and just using it in different contexts. So it's kind of like going under a lot of people's radar. So I would say this stuff isn't necessarily dead. It's just kind of, changed. You totally missed the point of the Bob Dylan movie, A Complete Unknown. It's based off of a book and leans into the personification of Bob Dylan rather than being 100% historical. I also don't buy it as being that unflattering either. Sure, he's presented as antisocial and perhaps aloof, but that's a persona / put on that he himself manufactured. The Bob Dylan that people know is not the man, but the characters he embodied, and Dylan himself co-signed the film, so clearly he doesn't think that it makes him look too bad. Furthermore, in my opinion, Walk the Line is considerably more paint by numbers in its approach, so much so that Walk Hard, a Dewey Cox story, immediately followed it up and took the piss out of the whole thing. Okay, first off, I mean, while what you say may be true in terms of like the book it's based off and the personification of Bob Dylan, why the fuck would I ever want to read or see, especially in a music biopic context, Bob Dylan fan fiction? Like, that's what you're describing here, right? Just Bob Dylan fan fiction? And if the whole point of this is to make Bob Dylan fan fiction, like, what, couldn't we have come up with a better story other than one where, again, it's not very flattering to his character? It makes him look fucking stupid at points. I mean, while what you say is true, Dylan's involved, though he approved the movie, also simultaneously he has said through, his PR that he has no plans on seeing the movie, which, I kind of respect. That is so Bob Dylan coded to like, involve yourself on some level in this film and like, do whatever with it, and then afterwards just be like, yeah, I'm not seeing that shit. But yeah, again, I just don't see the point in a biopic that doesn't give us some kind of insight into the person that the biopic is about, even if some of it is fictionalized or exaggerated. And I just don't think A Complete Unknown does that, like, on any level. We need to stop letting artists get away with calling their feature-length musical odysseys EPs. I mean, okay, I'm sure you're saying this in reaction to the Ethel Cain project that dropped recently, and while I guess I agree, it is kind of outlandish to refer to that thing simply as an EP. Ultimately, what's the harm in it? Who cares? EPs, albums, mixtapes, the lines between all of these things are so fucking blurred now. But still, for the most part, when you do catch something that like, how is this an album? It's so short. How is this an EP? It's so long. How is this a mixtape? It sounds like an album. Or how is this an album? It sounds like a fucking mixtape. I think there's not a whole lot of meaning around these things these days. It just sort of seems like now that everything is just kind of all being filtered through streaming services, everything's been flattened and nobody knows what the fuck is what anymore. The Plankton AI cover of Pink Pony Club is fucking great. Obviously not better than the original, but in a sea of AI slop, it goes hard as hell.
I know you wanted me to stay.
No, look, I do think there are some entertaining, use cases for AI with vocal manipulation and so on and so forth. A lot of the bones that I have to pick with AI come mostly from generative AI and the way that it's used to sort of launder plagiarism and stealing from other creators. And I guess I'm also disturbed and, worried about AI in terms of like its capabilities when it comes to impersonating different people's voices and maybe certain types of images to make, false information, false flags. And there's just so little rules and regulations around AI, around those sorts of matters. If all the AI was doing and presenting to the world was like silly SpongeBob covers and rap songs and whatever, it would be fine. It's the uses for evil that AI has, the inherent to it that I feel like we really need to be wary of, need to be vocal against, and need to be pushing for regulation on in order to make sure that, things don't totally go to shit economically and socially just because we wanted some Plankton SpongeBob covers of Adele songs. You get to build a dream band for any genre you want. There have to be 5 members, a bassist, a keyboardist, a guitarist, a drummer, and a wild card. What's the lineup going to look like, and how do you think they'll sound together? I don't know, man. I'm going to make a nightmare band. I'm not going to make a dream band. I would have Corey Taylor of Slipknot on theremin, Kristen Hayter, aka Lingua Ignota, on vocals, Mo Tucker of Velvet Underground fame on drums, Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers on bass, and I would have Charles Mingus on guitar. He doesn't play guitar, but hey, you know what? He's gonna figure it out. And how would they sound together? They would sound amazing. It would sound incredible. I have no idea how they would do it, but they would do it. The Xiu Xiu cover of Fast Car is on par with the original. I don't know. I need to listen to it again. One thing I can say, though, is Xiu Xiu does have a history of putting together some great covers. Their cover of Frosty the Snowman is better than the original. And every year I'm putting on that one, and I don't care how many children it gives nightmares. That cover of Frosty is going on. It's the superior version now. Miss Lauryn Hill is a top 5 artist of all time. I don't know. I don't agree. I mean, I think, as far as like hip hop is concerned, Lauryn Hill has made like a top 10 album for the genre, but I feel like to be a top 5 artist of all time, regardless of genre, you've got to have like more output. You've got to have a larger, more impactful body of work, as great as, Miseducation is. And, I can even give Lauryn the Fugees output, which is great. Obviously, we need more to be a top 5 artist of all time. Didn't think my favorite album of the year so far would end up being a soundtrack, but the 28 Years Later soundtrack is honestly incredible. Causeway is such a beautiful track. I've always been a fan of Young Fathers, but this might be my favorite thing they've done. I've listened to some tracks on it here and there. I thought they were pretty interesting. I'm really happy that Young Fathers got tapped for that soundtrack. I think it's a really amazing opportunity for them. I've not given the project a full listen front to back yet, but it was like not necessarily it engaging me when I did try it in the same way that many Young Fathers albums have up until that point. But it is a soundtrack. Maybe I should try to sit down with it again. Worst album of 2025 so far has to go to Will Smith's Based on a True Story. I've not listened to that record all the way through. I've been kind of avoiding it. It's Will Smith putting out a new album in the year of our Lord 2025 after not having released one in 20 years and with zero justification as to why it even exists at all. The further you go into this album, the more the Emperor's clothes on Will are stripped away and you truly see how embarrassing of a person he really is. Bonus dishonorable shout out to Pretty Girls Divorce Dadcore and his freestyle, if you could call it that. I mean, look, Will Smith is a great actor, accomplished guy, cool dude, but at this point, was anybody under the illusion that he would make a great rap album at this point, or that there were clothes on the Emperor? Unfortunately, despite the fact that I think Will is a very funny and talented and, in many respects, a cool-esque guy, there sadly have been a lot of embarrassing moments and, revelations coming out of the Smith family as of late. The only person keeping their shit together, honestly, is Willow. Shout out to Willow for just making good music, being cool, being drama-free, just doing her thing, being sick as hell, And hopefully she just like continues doing that, because like Will was the only person out here in the Smith family not making a complete fool of themselves on a regular basis. I'm just going to say that. Idols by Youngblood is the most uninspired and derivative and obnoxious rock album I've heard so far. The instrumentals sound like if Meatloaf wrote songs for U2 during the early 2000s, but made it sound as cheap as possible. Lyrics are vague and overused emo cliches about mental health and self-love that pretend to be deep when they really say nothing at all. Damn, that's harsh. I mean, I've not listened to the record myself. I didn't enjoy any of the singles. I just kind of feel like Youngblood exists in this spectrum of rock music that the band Måneskin sort of does for me. Like, it's not the worst rock you could be listening to in the world. There's certainly far worse rock artists, but like, it's not that great either, and just feels like overly formulaic and commercial, and like it's just a copy of a copy of a copy. Like, it's trying to rekindle some old stale perception of like what a rock star could or should be at this point. For as near perfect as Let God Sort Him Out is musically, the album cover is sort of meh. Yeah, I'm not crazy about the album cover, honestly. It's not one of my favorite album covers. I'll say that much. I've just around the internet have seen that like Skull character spammed so much that like what appeal it may have had at one point has kind of waned. It's just like oversaturation. There's just not quite as much novelty that it had at one point.
Yellow diamonds look like PP. Bitches fly from DC on my private to Waikiki. 3P. Niggas is my sons and that's on repeat.
Hey, whoa, cool. There you go. That's the Patreon only Let's Argue Responses clip show video. Wow, awesome. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Clipse, show, YouTube, forever.